Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the month ahead, November 2020, for the sign of Libra. Now, one of the things that is characteristic really about November for you, Libra, is that it has a lot to do with finance and self-worth. And that's such a matter of how you look at you yourself, your assets, your offerings to the world, to your partners, to people in your life, as well as what's going on in your bank account. There's a lot more as well that's happening, but that's perhaps the first thing we need to look at. Now, one of the other things that I feel is important as we look at the month ahead is the idea that what I do is show you the shape of things to come. So we're not really focusing on or just sitting back and listening to a whole list of events and, so that everything is written down in the cosmos, literally. And really, we forget we need to put ourselves in that mix. We are the driver of our own bus. And yes, events happen to us out of the blue, but always it's how we react to them, what we do in response to them really matters. And that's what astrology is all about. It's about evolution. It's about understanding, how many options we may have and growing through our difficulties and feeling humble about the wonderful things that tend to happen to us. So let's get going. I'm going to look here at your month ahead. I'm going to bring up a little chart here. I'm going to disappear into the corner, but I'll come back a little later. And you see Libra is on this left-hand portion of the circle, and it's in the position of the first house, because this is how we look at how the planets are shaping up from your perspective. So they're all different for every sign of the zodiac, even though the planets and their positions are the same. And this is why you'll also find that there are key moments of the month which are common to every sign of the zodiac, but they're all expressed in rather different ways. So when we look at your month ahead, and we look at it, first of all, through where the sun is, because the sun is the center of everything, and it's illuminating a particular part of your horoscope, which means that it's time to focus on those things, bring them to the forefront of life, but also things just happen in relation to that. So it's brought into our conscious awareness. So we're here in the second house, which is all about money and self-worth. And I mentioned that really at the very beginning. And on the one hand, it is important to know where we are financially. And sometimes we'd rather not talk about it or be aware of it because we just rather muddle along. And that's why the sun in this area of the chart says, no, you can't muddle along anymore. Get it right. Look at what's going on in your accounts, with your credit cards, everything, and get it right. Because when we know what we're worth in terms of what's in our bank account, we know where we are, and it gives us a kind of sense of, right, we can go forward in the knowledge of what's real. And the same thing happens with self-worth as well. When we feel that we know what we're worth in terms of, well, maybe what we offer to other people, what we give in terms of our personal assets, what we have as gifts and talents. And also when we're talking about being in a relationship, whether that's with friends or working relationships or romantic relationships and marriages, it's how our other people treat us and how we feel valued. And it's really a matter of feeling valued in ourselves, just as much as knowing how much you're worth in the bank and thinking, right, that's it, now I can improve or I don't need to do anything more. It's the same really with the value we place in ourselves. We need to assess that we're full of a certain value and feel good about it and grow from that point. Now, one of the interesting things about, looking at this area of the horoscope for November is that in the opposite area, is planet Uranus. This is that television aerial here. And that's in the area of shared financial resources. So it's all about the relationship we have with banks and lending institutions, and also business partners and life partners, because we share finances. Uranus has been here for a couple of years, and it is very, very strong this month. It keeps popping up like a jack in the box at various intervals, the 7th, the 14th, the 17th, the 27th, the 20th. And every time we get a jab from Uranus, we have a wake-up call. And that could be a wake-up call to do with finances. It could be a wake-up call in terms of relationships. It could be all sorts of wake-up calls. But I guess the central theme really will be about your value. And when we feel things aren't going well, people haven't appreciated us, or we're not getting value for money, that feels bad. And so Uranus tends to pop out like a jack in the box and say, you can do something about this, and that's what is needed. And those dates that I've just given you are important dates. Now, the other thing about this month is that it has quite a lot to do with relationships as well, for one reason or another. Now, if we start the month out, we've got Mercury in your sign. And I'd like to say that when Mercury is in your sign, you get the ability to communicate in the sense of, getting hold of people and discussing things that you want to discuss. You get to move around and maybe even travel. You learn something. You may even start to do something which is going to add to your bank of skills. That would be normal. But unfortunately, Mercury has been retrograde for a good part of October. So it's meant that perhaps that whole theme has been a little bit more difficult to manifest, and there've been a lot of delays and diversions and generally frustrating kind of episodes. But as we start the month out with Mercury in retrograde, it is angling planet Saturn here in the 4th house of home and family. And we're going to be talking about this in a moment, because this cluster here, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, is very important this month. But let me talk about the entry into November, because something may have happened at the end of October, which kind of flew, the pieces went up in the air, and they're all going to have to come down in a different form. And that's one of the things to think about, is that things can't be the same after some things have happened. But you can rearrange them into a different form. And that's what you want to think about. And certainly in the first week of November, it may have a lot to do with moving things around and sorting things out, whether that's moving money around or moving people around, moving dates around, whatever you may be doing. But it's Mercury, it's thought application. You're trying to put something together and make something whole and sensible. And because Mercury turns direct on the 3rd of November, it will meet up again with Saturn on the 6th. So you can see how that first week of November is going to have a lot to do with getting things in shape, or getting things back in shape, or getting things in a new shape. And you may not feel full of the joys of spring in that first week of November, but time passes, we move on, and what did seem sort of bleak and maybe not so jolly at the start of the month may in fact start to look a whole lot better as we get through the month. Now, another reason why relationships are in the mix this month is Venus. Venus is going to be in your sign right through until the 21st of November. And normally when Venus is in your sign, there's opportunity. You feel as though you're a little bit luckier. And certainly as far as love goes, there's a lot more love to be had in life. Now, you can hear that a sort of a haltering in my voice, and that's because things are never that plain sailing. What we can say is that November, right up to the 21st, is a really, really good time to set things in motion in terms of love affairs, maybe financial affairs, and things that really have your heart involved in them. That's the motivation. Whether things happen that either just pop up out of the blue, so you get offers and opportunities that make you feel really valued and terrific, and a relationship takes off in a really welcome way, or whether you feel things are rather the reverse and that it is still something of a struggle, you, in a way, have some control over this. And I think if you think about things, that idea I said right at the beginning, things happen, but then what you do in the wake of them is, it could just change the whole outcome. And it's all about negotiation. It's all about rethinking and looking at things from a different perspective. What I would like to say is that from about the 21st through to about the end of the month, we've got Venus here sort of hovering around this Uranus point. And I would say that period, 21st to the end of November, is quite a delicate time for some relationships. If they're already got huge cracks in them, it won't take much to split them apart. But of course, in other cases, being aware of those cracks means you can fill them. And I think we'll just leave it at that, because, you know, that gives you an option at that point. And of course, sometimes we meet somebody and Uranus Venus contacts, and that's more towards the end of the month, are literally out of the blue. We run into somebody and suddenly all the sparks are flying. It's absolutely fantastic. And that may be in store for some Librans. Relationships still. Reason why? Mars. Planet Mars has been in the area of relationships since July. Now, often when Mars is in this area, you'll get a real kind of buzz with relationships. If you've been single, suddenly it seems as though there's somebody you could potentially partner up with, you know, everywhere. There's much more activity. And in a long-term relationship, maybe you haven't been very interesting bedfellows for a while. Suddenly Mars gets into this position and it's all very hot again. And those are the sorts of things that we're, you know, familiar with, and they can be very welcome. But unfortunately, Mars has been squaring up to this little grouping here. And also in recent weeks, it's been retrograde. So there have been a lot of relationship problems. And even if we move aside for a minute, maybe your significant other, that relationship, there've been other relationships, whether they've been with work people or whether they've been with friends or members of the family or whatever. There's been arguments and upsets, and maybe things haven't gone well at all. But you know, relationships are organic. And as I often say, winter gives way to spring. And you have to remember these seasonal changes in relationships are something you have to roll with sometimes. But to come back to this kind of setup, you know, Mars squaring Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter, my goodness, that, you know, this trio has been with us since the start of the year, and it's been the background to the coronavirus and all the terrible things that we've had to deal with all year. So when you put that in relationship to something in your sign or something happening, then it becomes personal. It isn't just something looked at on the television anymore. It's right in your kitchen. And in fact, in your kitchen might be very appropriate, because these planets here are in the fourth house of home and family. So there may have been a lot of family issues, a lot of domestic issues, a lot of property matters, and maybe there's been a huge range here. Maybe you've been struggling with mortgage payments, and maybe you've had to let the house go. Maybe you haven't been able to sell a house. Maybe you've had to move to another rental, so that the home conditions themselves have been less than satisfactory. But that may not be the case. Everything has been fine. But what you've got instead is kind of some difficulties with people in your family, whether those are, you know, as often happens, families get upset with each other, but sometimes there are concerns. You know, members of the family aren't very well, or they're going through a very tough time. And so there's been a lot of concern focused on this area of life. Put Mars in there, it just makes it all the more aggravating, and of course gives us that feeling, when will this ever be over? But fortunately, on and around the 14th, Mars is turning direct, and it will start to march out of the sign of Aries. It'll go at the end of the year. So you are going to sort of see, or you can say to yourself, this is the beginning of the end of all this aggravation and harassment. But let's also look here, very importantly, around the same time, the 12th to be exact, but roughly around the same time, we've got the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. Third time of asking. It was there in early April, 5th of April, just before Easter, and it was there again at the end of June. And so the third time these two planets meet may be the time that is really important. And Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions are extreme, and you can get extreme success and fabulous kind of developments. And you can also get the total pits. There's nothing halfway between these two planets. And I think if you have a birthday somewhere round about the 15th of October, you are really much more likely to feel the effects of this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. Now, this is something I've said to every sign, and that is, as Jupiter creates opportunity, Pluto is about elimination. So sometimes opportunity comes out of something that goes, but it can also be just the two things together create a fabulous development. Thinking about properties and homes, perhaps if a property hasn't sold or you've been concerned about a property matter or mortgages or whatever, you might find there's a breakthrough here. Or you may find that you have to cut your losses, but one way or another, there's going to be resolution after this. Now, I'm going to scoot through a little bit. I have talked about that latter part of the month being important for relationships, so I've gone through that. But I want to come to this very important point, and you probably read it, penumbral lunar eclipse. This is a full moon eclipse. It happens on the 30th of the month. The sun here in Sagittarius, the moon in Gemini. It's flanking the communication axis. So this is an important, possibly life-changing communication. Whether that's a conversation you have with someone, whether a message comes through, an email, however we get our information, what we find out could turn out to really change everything. And even if you're listening to me and we get past the 30th and you say, I can't say that was really important. You may find that this period of time was very important. The roots of a situation are planted in this period of time. So it's worth being very observant. And of course, you can make things happen yourself. So if you want to perhaps have something discussed and you're anxious to close a deal or to get something done and dusted, then this is a good time to activate it, because endings, closure, completion are very reflective of this lunar eclipse. And also you might think about the end of May, 22nd of May, when there was a new moon up here. Maybe you were given an opportunity at this time. You get to see how far that opportunity has taken you. Maybe there were other things that you did. You signed a form, you did something at the end of May, and it's got a relationship with what happens at the end of November. And that's certainly worth looking at the little grey cells, shaking them up a bit and seeing if that produces any kind of understanding. So I'm going to come back here. And hopefully you've got some of those dates down, because dates are important, but they're only important in terms of a slow process. And I think if we can look at our lives in terms of what's going on with us, what is the process, then we have a much healthier attitude to, what's going on a day-to-day basis with the planets. We can use them, we can understand them, and we can make adjustments accordingly. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to giving you an update in December, your December stars, and of course also my twice monthly videos, which are a little bit more general in terms of what's going up there on up there in terms of countries and nations and collective rather than personal. So I look forward to being here again. Bye for now.